Hi, I'm Maham Tariq from SkillCub, and in this video we'll learn how to create and connect to a Azure Windows virtual machine. So let's get started. From Azure Services on the Azure portal, click on Virtual Machines. Here, click on Create to create a new virtual machine. Now we need to fill in these details. First, select a resource group that you've already created, or you can create a new resource group here. Then choose a unique name for your virtual machine and your desired region. And then select the security type. I'll go with the standard one. Then you need to select the image for your virtual machine. I'll be using the Windows one. I'll keep the x86 architecture, and then I'm going to select the size of the server, which can also be changed later. For now, I'm going to stick with the 8 GB one. The Windows virtual machines always need a username and password for you to sign into them later. So take a note of the username and password you're selecting here. Here in the next step, you can choose the type of traffic flow you need in your virtual machine. You can always allow or block the inbound port traffic. I'm leaving the RDP port open here because I'll be using this port to log into the virtual machine later. Now that we're done, I can click on Next to check on the disk settings. Here you can select the OS disk type. I'll be using the standard HDD disk. Then you can choose which encryption method you're going to use. You can choose the Azure managed key, which is encryption at rest, which is the default option. Or you can choose to manage your key yourself, or you can choose the double encryption method. I'll just stick to the standard one. Next is networking. So every virtual machine needs to exist in a virtual network. If you don't already have a virtual network set up, you can create a new one here, or you can use the default one made by Azure. I'll stick to the default one. And here again, you can choose the inbound traffic rules for your virtual machine. I'll just allow the RDP port and then click on Next. Now you can also choose to set up the diagnostics for your virtual machine. I'll just go with the default options here. You can also choose to set up Azure Active Directory. You can also enable auto shutdown and alerts for your virtual machine. In the Advanced tab, you can choose to add an extension to your virtual machine from many third-party applications, for instance PowerShell for running scripts, etc. But for now, we don't need any in this lab. Azure Dedicated Host is an Azure service that provides physical servers able to host one or more Azure virtual machines dedicated to your organization and your workloads only. This is obviously more expensive, so choose only if you need to. Next, a proximity placement group is a logical grouping used to make sure that Azure compute resources are physically located close to each other. Next, we have the Tags tab. Here you can add metadata about your virtual machine. I'm just adding the name of skill curve. You can use these tags in order to identify your virtual machine later. Now I'll just review everything and click on Create once done. Creation and deployment of resources can take some time, so I'll just pause the video until then and come back when the deployment is completed. Okay, so deployment is now completed. We can go back to the virtual machine resource that we've created. And let's observe everything that we have here. We can see the status as running. I'll just copy the public IP address because we need it for the connection. I'll open the remote desktop connection option from my own PC and enter the public IP address. And then it will ask me for the credentials that I made for this virtual machine. And as I enter those credentials, I am now logged into my own virtual machine. The next step is to click on Server Manager and add roles and features. Click on Next. Keep it selected and click on Next. Click on Next again. Now here from the server rules, select Web Server IIS if it is not already installed. Click on Add Feature and then click on Next. Once the features get installed, You can just close this window and then open Internet Explorer. Now type in http localhost and you should be able to see a default browser window opening, and here it is. Now let's do the same thing, web browser of your own machine. Instead of writing localhost, I'll type in the public IP address of my virtual machine. But this page is not loading, but it has a reason. This is happening because we don't have port 80 opened in the inbound rule section. So I'll just go into networking and open the port 80 of my virtual machine and then try to do the same thing again. And now it's running completely fine. Now before I end the lab, we have one last step to follow. I want to modify this web browser page. So for that, I'll go back to the remote session host, go into the C drive, go to the inetpub folder and then enter the root folder. Here I'll create a new text document with my custom text. Rename the text file to index and save it as an HTML file. Now it's a web page. Now let's test it. When I refresh the page, I'll see my custom text. I can do that same thing in the web browser of my own machine. I can see the text here. Now that's all we had for this lab. But before ending the lab, I would like to delete all of the resources that I created during this lab, as most of them are billable.